The Hollywood film Platoon represents a close-up insight to the harsh realities of war that individuals faced in Vietnam. It describes Chris Taylor's own perspective in the Vietnam War and exposes the mental and physical strains individuals endured. In addition, Platoon honours the memory and lessons that were learned in Vietnam by showing the truth that war is not a fantasy or an adventure, yet is regarded by veterans themselves as hell. With the film being presented in narration of a soldier himself, it creates a personalised perspective of life in the Vietnam War. Once arrived, Chris Taylor finds his idealism fading and considers himself to be insignificant in comparison to others. Along with this comes the exposure to the realities of war, such as insects, harsh weather conditions, contact with diseases such as malaria, watching allies fall, and facing the constant threat of death. With the plot thickening, men within the platoon begin illegal killings during a village raid, and Chris finds himself downward spiralling into a psychological meltdown. With many veterans finding their mental state at a loss, they begin to understand that they are now fighting more than just the Vietnam War. They are fighting one another. In association to the Vietnam War, the film depicts the immense responsibility and mental alterations veterans experience when serving their country. Soldiers adopted what was viewed as an unbeatable attitude that overall attributed to their fuel for conflict and success. Unlike these soldiers, Chris Taylor was not proud at all of his involvement and instead became dehumanized to the point that he was willing to commit unnecessary murders of Vietnamese citizens. Over the course of the film, the realities of warfare produce a disillusionment of moral principles and project corruption and loss of innocence upon the veterans. Platoon is a film that breaks new ground, that aims to recreate the grim chaos of combat and displays how one's decision can haunt a soldier's eternity, and when cemented in horror, how they uphold and maintain their humanity. In association to Platoon, the companion reading I chose is a book written by William C. Westmoreland, who in fact was an Army general himself for the United States forces during the Vietnam War. The book, The Vietnam War, The History of America's Conflict in Southeast Asia, recounted some of the major events starting from America's involvement in 1965 to 1975, along with the difficulties American soldiers faced during this time. He recalls US intervention, rival ideologies, disengagement of soldiers, and the hardship of trying to locate missing US personnel. In particular, General Westmoreland reflects on the harsh realities of war and the burden it had on military forces alone, such as the 77-day siege in Khe Sanh, in which was regarded as an iconic confrontation within the Vietnam War. General Westmoreland regards it as an epic test of wills, in which over 6,000 United States Marines held off over 20,000 Communist Vietnamese troops in the early 1968. Through watching the film, Westmoreland allowed me to feel more sympathetic through truly understanding the lengths that these veterans went to for their country. Yet, although he documented the main events of the Vietnam War thoroughly, I would have liked to understand further accounts of the attitudes and the psychological states of the veterans during this time. Overall, the companion reading laid a foundation for me to further understand the Vietnam War and how the harsh realities of warfare tested one's humanity.